They did not tell anyone until after. Not because they were ashamed, not because they had doubts, but because somewhere in the process of deciding, they understood that telling someone beforehand meant opening the decision to the territory where other people's fear lives. And they had spent enough of their life in that territory, making choices inside other people's comfort zones. Editing their own wanting into something more acceptable, more reasonable, more considerate of how the people around them would feel about it. This time, they did not do that. They found the bike, they did the research, they handled the money, they filled out the paperwork. And when it was done, when the keys were in their hand and the decision was irreversible and nothing anyone said could change what had already happened, then they told people. The reactions came exactly as expected. The parent who went quiet in the specific way that is louder than any argument. The partner who said, I support you, but in the tone that means something else entirely. The friend who sent the statistics, always the statistics. As if the person standing there holding motorcycle keys had somehow never considered that motorcycles carry risk, had arrived at this decision in a complete informational vacuum, and required only the correct data to reverse course. The writer heard all of it, absorbed all of it, thanked people for caring, and kept the keys. What happened in the space between wanting the motorcycle and keeping it despite everything? That space that most people who have never stood in it cannot fully understand is one of the most psychologically significant things a person can do. Not because of the motorcycle is almost beside the point, because of what the decision required them to become in order to make it. And what it required them to become is the thing worth understanding completely. Start here with the advice itself, because the advice deserves to be examined honestly before anything else. The people who gave it were not wrong about the risk. That has to be stated clearly and without qualification. Motorcycles are statistically more dangerous than cars. The numbers are real. The people who cited them were not inventing a problem to control someone. The risk is genuine, and the concern behind the advice was, in most cases, genuine too. But here's what the advice was also carrying that nobody named directly. When someone tells you not to buy a motorcycle, they are not only communicating information about motorcycles, they are communicating something about their relationship with uncertainty, about their tolerance for outcomes they cannot predict or prevent, about the specific discomfort that arrives when someone they are connected to makes a choice that introduces a variable into their own emotional life that they did not agree to carry. Because that is what happens when someone you love does something dangerous. You inherit the risk, not the physical risk, the emotional risk, the possibility of a phone call, the possibility of a specific kind of loss that your body begins to calculate the moment the decision is announced and does not stop calculating until the person is back safe, and the calculation can be temporarily suspended. The advice was not purely about the rider. It never is. It was partly, in many cases, primarily about the person giving it, about what they needed the rider to choose in order to protect themselves from a fear they did not know how to ask the rider to carry for them. This is not a criticism of the people who gave the advice. It is an observation about what advice almost always contains that the person receiving it is not supposed to notice. The writer noticed. Maybe not consciously, maybe not in words, but somewhere in the process of weighing the advice and deciding to proceed anyway, they felt the part of it that was not about them. The part that was someone else's fear wearing the costume of concern. And something in them, something that had been waiting a long time for the right moment, decided that this time, on this decision, They were not going to let someone else's fear determine the shape of their life. Now go to the moment of purchase itself, because this is where something happens that almost nobody talks about. There is a specific quality to the first decision a person makes entirely for themselves. Not the first decision they make alone. People make decisions alone all the time. This is different. This is the first decision they make in full awareness of the disapproval, the concern, the fear, the quietly communicated expectation that they will choose differently and proceed anyway, not out of rebellion, not out of defiance, not to prove something to anyone watching, simply because it is what they want. That quality, the quality of a choice made from the interior rather than shaped by the exterior, has a feeling that is unlike almost anything else in adult life. Most choices are made inside a negotiation that the person is not always aware they are conducting. The job taken because it was practical. The relationship stayed in past its time because leaving felt selfish. The apartment in the neighborhood that made sense rather than the one that felt alive. The version of themselves presented to the world that had been edited over years into something that offended the fewest people and caused the least friction and moved through the world without demanding too much space. The motorcycle purchase, for many people, is the first time that negotiation is interrupted. The first time the interior voice, the one that knows what it wants without consulting anyone else, gets to be the only voice in the room. Not because the other voices are not present. They are present. The parent's silence is present. The partner's particular tone is present. The friend's statistics are present. But this time, for the first time maybe, or the first time in a long time, those voices do not determine the outcome. The person hears them, considers them, and chooses differently. And something happens in that moment that does not happen in any other kind of decision. They become briefly and completely the author of their own life. Not because the motorcycle is the right choice by anyone else's metric, because for this specific person, in this specific moment, making the choice they actually want to make, in full knowledge of the cost and the risk and the opinions of everyone who loves them, is an act of self-authorship so rare and so clarifying that the motorcycle itself is almost incidental. The keys are not really keys. They are evidence. Evidence that they are still in there. That the person who wants things and chooses things and moves through the world according to their own internal compass has not been entirely replaced by the accommodating, reasonable, edited version that the world has been gradually constructing for years. Here is what nobody says about the people who do this. And it needs to be said directly. They are often the most responsible people in the room. Not the most reckless, the most responsible. The ones who show up, who handle things, who have been for most of their adult lives the person that other people's needs land on first. The reliable one, the steady one. The one whose own wanting gets consistently subordinated to the practical and the necessary and the good of the people around them. For this kind of person, the accumulated weight of consistent responsibility does something over time that is rarely discussed. It creates a distance between the person and their own desires, not an inability to want things, an inability to act on what they want without first running it through the filter of whether it is appropriate, whether it is the right time, whether the people around them can handle it, whether their wanting is going to cost someone else something they did not budget for. The motorcycle sits outside that filter. Not because motorcycles are inherently liberating in some mystical sense, because the motorcycle is too obviously, too undeniably, too completely something they want for its own sake and nothing else. It does not serve a practical function. It does not make the responsible person more effective in their responsibilities. It cannot be justified in the language of usefulness or practicality or what is best for everyone. It can only be justified in one language, because I want it, because it is mine, because for once I am going to choose the thing I want without translating it into something that other people can accept. That language for many riders is a language they are speaking for the first time when they buy the bike. And the speaking of it changes something that does not change back. There is a layer underneath all of this that is the darkest and the most honest, and the one that almost nobody who has not stood in this exact place will immediately understand. The people who buy motorcycles against everyone's advice are not brave in the way bravery is usually described. They are not fearless. They have not decided the risk does not matter. Many of them are acutely, privately, completely aware of exactly what they are risking. Not just the physical risk, the relational risk, the disappointment they are causing, the fear they are handing to people who did not ask to carry it, the specific ongoing cost of being someone who made a choice that the people who love them have never fully made peace with. They carry all of that, and they ride anyway, not because the carrying is easy, because the alternative, the version of their life in which they gave the bike up before they ever had it, in order to protect other people from the fear of it, that alternative has a cost too. A cost that is less visible and less dramatic and completely unacknowledged by the people who gave the advice. The cost of one more decision made inside someone else's comfort zone. One more piece of their own wanting folded up and put away in the place where the things they wanted but did not choose live. One more confirmation that the edited version of themselves, the reasonable one, the safe one, the one that does not cause worry or friction or late night calculations of probability, is the version that gets to exist. That cost does not arrive in a single moment. It accumulates over years, over dozens of small decisions made in the direction of other people's comfort and away from their own interior compass. It accumulates into a specific kind of heaviness that is very hard to name and very easy to recognize in the face of someone who has been carrying it for a long time. The heaviness of a person who stopped trusting their own wanting somewhere along the way and has been navigating by other people's approval ever since. The motorcycle purchase is often the moment that accumulation stops. Not because everything changes, most things stay the same. The responsibilities remain, the relationships remain. The world continues to have opinions about the choices being made in it, but something internal shifts. Some load is redistributed. Some interior voice that had been getting quieter and quieter for years is suddenly, clearly, undeniably audible again. The voice that says, "This is what I want. I know the cost. I am choosing it anyway." The bike is in the garage now, or it is parked outside, or it is somewhere that is specifically, privately theirs, in a way that almost nothing else in their life is. The people who gave the advice have mostly stopped mentioning it. Some of them came around, some of them did not. The relationship with risk that the advice was really about, the other person's fear wearing the costume of concern, that relationship did not disappear when the bike was purchased. It simply stopped being the deciding factor. And the rider lives with that. The knowledge that someone they love carries something they put there. The ongoing negotiation between their own choosing and the cost that choosing imposes on the people nearby. That negotiation does not end with the purchase. It continues every time they put on the helmet, every time they come home. But they come home every time. And when they do, they are something that the version of themselves who never bought the bike would not have been. Present. Returned from somewhere real. From a place where the only thing that existed was the road and the machine and the sum of their own competence and attention and fully deployed aliveness. They come home more fully than they left. Not because the ride fixed anything, because for the duration of the ride, they were not managing anyone's fear, including their own. They were simply, completely, undeniably themselves, in the specific way that only happens in the places we choose without permission. If you have ever given someone advice not to buy a motorcycle, understand something. You were not wrong about the risk. You were right about the risk. And you were also, in some portion of that advice, asking them to absorb your fear so that you would not have to carry it. That is human. That is what love does sometimes without knowing it. But the person who bought the bike anyway was not ignoring your love. They were honoring something older than it, the part of themselves that existed before they learned to make their choices inside other people's comfort. Before they understood that wanting things loudly was inconsiderate. Before the long education and editing themselves into someone easier to love. They were not choosing the motorcycle over you. They were choosing themselves for the first time in a long time, maybe for the first time ever. And if you can find a way to understand that, not agree with it, not stop being afraid, just understand it. You will know something about the person you love that almost nobody who loves them has ever been willing to see. They are not reckless. They are finally, after everything, free.